Good evening. Welcome to the March 9th, 2020 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission, and happy daylight savings time. Sounds good, doesn't it? If you'd stand with us, please. Commissioner Craig Lynch will lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Craig.
Thank you. Would you bow with me, please? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and the blessings you've given us, and I hope we've used those blessings well. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for our county. We thank you for the country we live in. We just thank, we got so many blessings, and we thank you for them. But now, Heavenly Father, the things that are on our hearts and minds, the tornado victims, we pray for them, Heavenly Father, and thank you. There's such an outpouring of all the people in our community helping them. It's just showing how blessed we are that we can share our blessings with them, and that's truly a blessing that we have to be able to share. We just pray that you continue to be with them. They're having heartaches, and we pray that they just need your help. Pray for our country. Pray for the virus that's affecting our country. It started so quickly, and we know, Heavenly Father, you can stop it that quick too. We pray that you just intervene in that. Be with us tonight in our meeting, and let us make wise decisions in Christ's name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Call a roll, please, Gail.
Charlotte P. Here. Chip Pinion. Craig Lynch. David Jones. Jim Averwater. Here. Lee Bogle. Here. Marvin Whitworth. Here. Mike Cush. Pettis Reed. Here. Rhonda Allen. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Gail. We have no minutes to approve tonight and no items withdrawn or deferred.
Correct.
So we'll get right to it. Item 6 is new business. 6A, these are requests for site plan approval. 6AA. Item number is 19-3057, J.T. Parkhurst Farm, construction of 4,200 square foot construction, sales, and service building on .66 acres. It's zone CS, located at 2519 East Main Street. Nicole Michelle Bird is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good evening, Commission members. You'll recall this site plan was considered at the last Planning Commission's meeting and was deferred. There were several items on there that still needed a little bit of attention. Primarily, staff was still looking to find where the septic soils were on the property directly to the east, which the applicant does own as well. That septic record has been located, and the septic areas are actually behind the house, so that retention area, is not going to impact any of their septic soils. Also, I believe there was some concern about the electric line as far as relocating that. That appears to have also been resolved. As I understand it, there's only one item that's still outstanding, and that has to do with the infiltration test, just to make sure that the bioretention area will work as designed. Staff feels comfortable moving this forward, subject to that, getting that test. If that doesn't work, of course, they'll have to just figure out something else that would work. But we feel comfortable moving this forward with that condition. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Do you have anything else on that?
Any questions for staff? We have a motion and a second to approve item 19-3057 for J.T. Parkhurst Farm. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6B, these are items, we have 5 items, I think, that are on our agenda for public hearings and a rezoning request. And I'll go ahead and mention that this body is a recommending body and will recommend before the full commission. And these rezoning requests will be heard before the full county commission in this room on April the 16th. That's a Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. 6:30 p.m. April the 16th in this room, the Rutherford County Commission. Item 6BA, item number is REZ 20-003, Karzan Muhammad Ali. Location is 3940 Shelbyville Pike. Commission district is 6. County Commissioner is Joe Frank Jernigan. The size of the site is approximately 8.87 acres. Tax map is 137. Existing zoning is commercial services. Proposed zoning is commercial general. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This probably looks familiar as well. As you recall, this was actually deferred at the February 10th Planning Commission meeting just last month. The applicant was not present. So the staff report that you have on your iPads tonight is pretty much identical to the staff report that you had last month, with the exception of the information I put in there about this application being deferred. Just real quick to recap the application, he's asking to zone the property commercial general in order to construct a used car lot on the property. Commercial general is the first commercial zone that does allow motor vehicle sales. They have submitted a concept plan, which is included with your agenda packets. You'll recall that there is an existing building on the property. It was the site for a bar, tavern. It has not been used in that manner for several months, but the rest of the property would be used for motor vehicle display and sales. As we discussed at the last meeting, as you recall, there was a lot of discussion about where the trucks would drop off cars and things. There was some concern about it being in the right-of-way and things like that, which of course as staff we don't want to see. They would have to submit an engineered site plan for us demonstrating they can meet all the parking requirements, loading requirements as well. I believe the applicant is present tonight, so with that we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have on this.
Any questions before we hear from the applicant? Is the applicant present? Please come forward. If you would state your name and address for the record, and also give us a brief description of what you want to do.
My name is Karzan Muhammad Ali. My address is 2633 Bowater Lane in Antioch, Tennessee. The property address is 3940 Shelbyville Highway in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. As mentioned, the property that I have purchased was previously the Empty Bottles Bar and Tavern. Many of you all are probably familiar with that. Also mentioned was that property has not been used in that manner for quite some time, and we find an opportunity to have a pretty good business going there if we were to convert it to a used car lot. Similarly, on the other side of the street, a little ways down, there's already a used car lot there whom we know, and they went through a similar process, and they're having great success as well. So we aim to do that, of course, with meeting all the requirements, engineer site plans, so on and so forth, to make sure we don't provide any hazards.
I think there were several questions we had, maybe about truck traffic and things.
Yes, it was.
Remember?
Yes, sir. About bringing your cars in, are you going to bring them in just on two cars on a trailer, or are you going to carry a trailer load? How are you going to bring them in? Where is the trailer going to be when you unload it?
Yeah, so that really depends on what type of delivery we have coming. If it's a singular vehicle, you usually have just a simple tow truck that's towing the car behind. Of course, the cars, if it's unable to roll, then you'll have a flatbed that the car will be on, and then it'll be lowered. And then if you have a multiple car delivery, of course, that will entail having a much larger tow truck with potential other customers' vehicles on it as well. With all that considered, we do plan on having a mapped out area for all three of those different situations. So essentially detailing out 3 different sizes of transportation that were to come through. And we're currently working on that and trying to find the best area to maneuver those trucks in.
Okay, from your front door to the highway, go back 1 or 2, I think, Doug. That maybe, or maybe one more back, Doug. That piece of property from your front door to the right-of-way of 231, not seeing it good there on that one for sure. Had one there a while ago that was real good.
Talking about the walkway right in front of the
Yeah,
The entrance.
Is that where you go unload them right there?
No. So what we envision happening is actually if it's a larger size vehicle, it's to actually coming forward so there will not be any backing up. And then once you come forward enough, you're able to angle the bed of the truck to where you're able to drop the vehicle off on that path, but the truck itself would not be on that narrow path. The truck itself would be in the actual lot because we're not going to have rows of cars in that big square right there where those vehicles are currently
Okay,
parked.
there's about 3 or 4 vehicles right there. You're not going to have cars up there? That's not going to be a
Correct.
showroom?
So the vehicles, just like they are now, they'd be on the perimeter. So they'd be on the perimeter of that lot. So you're still able to move traffic in and out of the lot. So we're not going to have any type of rows to where it's going to be blocking off that area. It also helps us out because if a customer is wanting to test drive a car, we're not having to move 3 or 4 cars to free up that one. So we envision that entire area being empty. So
So the most of your cars, your showroom's going to be off in the back between there and the,
yes, off in the back and along the sides.
okay.
So to get a rough car size, if those, you could about park 5 cars there, maybe 5 more on the side, and potentially have 8 or 9 on that longer side. That's where we would primarily keep all of our ready inventory. And of course, the cars that are not ready are still being prepared. Those are be in the back lot.
The little gravel lot that's south of that where it's not yours, is it?
That is not ours. If it was, it'd make the entire process quite a bit easier, but unfortunately, it's not.
You need to go ahead and buy that.
Yeah, and like.
One step at a time.
Yeah, and like I said, before, even if this is rezoned, before he's allowed to start operating, he's going to have to submit a site plan, because, we're going to want to see a close off of that. That way, they're not spilling over into that adjacent lot. He realizes it's not his, which is good, but, we'll want some improvements to have a barrier there to make sure that there's separation between the two.
So this will come back to us for site plan approval.
Possible. Generally, with parking, just parking changes, we can usually handle that administratively. Now, if you wanted to tear down the building and start over, new building, then yes.
Yeah, and I think one important thing to note is just due to the size of the facility and the lot itself, very, very rarely are we bringing in any vehicles on a 7 or 8 bed truck. It's usually just like if you were to call your insurance, they'd bring 1 tow truck, bring 1 car. That's about 90 to 95% of how our deliveries will be coming. We don't buy vehicles in bulk.
Let me ask a question real quick to the applicant. You were talking about cars that were still being prepped for sale. We're not talking about damaged or vehicles that are being repaired or anything like that, like a wrecker type situation, are we?
No,
Okay.
no, this is, no.
Because if that were the case, this zoning that you're asking for wouldn't work.
No
so.
type of record.
Okay,
No.
very good.
You doing repair work there in the back or no repair work?
No, there's no repair. It's not a mechanic shop. It's also not a body shop. This is strictly a automotive sale. Yep.
So I kind of want to go over what Craig said again, just to make sure that it's absolutely 100% clear here. When you bring in trucks, whether it be a tow truck or whatever, we don't want that vehicle having to back out into that highway. He needs a way to get in and get out of there without creating a traffic hazard. And that's been probably our biggest concern, this whole issue. You understand where we're going
Yes.
with that?
Yeah. So I think what's important to know, and something, of course, that we're going to look into, it's either you back in to not have to back out, or you go in and then have to back out. So at one point or another, you're going in reverse. If it's one of those larger type vehicles. However, if it's one of those single ones, then you're not having to back out or stop traffic or get in the way at all. You can make a full turn within the boundaries of our lot. So again, 90 to 95% is going to be that situation.
Doug, will there be any need? Will there be any need for extra landscaping on that? And how many cars did you say you were going to put on the lot? Kind of a two-part question. Will we require landscaping around this or not?
You'll have to do some perimeter landscaping as far as the parking area is concerned. The area that is currently zoned, around it, it's all zoned commercial services, which is the same zone, so you won't have to do any buffering. But the area that he'll be using for parking, we'll want to see like landscape islands and some landscaping like that, but it'll be significantly less than if it were adjacent to residentially zoned property.
And to answer the second part of your question, so it's, of course, depending on the size of the vehicle, but the perimeters of that lot, excluding the entrance, is where we plan to park all of our vehicles. You can imagine them, all of them parked in reverse. So I would guess anywhere from 16 to 20 cars along that perimeter.
Let me ask you, you're talking about all the cars will go towards the back too, where you'll have a lot of them parked back there. That seems to look like a flat rock that's back there. Will you be working on that to maybe gravel it and
Which area?
behind the building, right back there?
Correct.
That looks like a flat rock more than anything. What
It is.
will you be graveling that?
We don't have any plans to
Well,
gravel.
I'll address that. He'll have to make some improvements to bring it up to county standard as far as paving and things. Now, we wouldn't want to see gravel back there, but, you know, depending, we'll work with him as far as how much area he wants to use for that, but that's what the site plan will be. Part of that is to bring that up to
Yeah, of
proper
course.
parking standards.
Any county standards, we don't have an opinion on. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. So if that involves any type
That and
of...
the entrance going back there as well, Doug?
Right, yes, I mean, we'll look at the entire site. Now, I know there's I know there's a little bit of a drop between the front and the back there as far as a little topography. I know there's been some inspections out there before when they were doing some other activities out that way, so I've been out, looked at the property. There is some, about 10 feet, so, I mean, there is a little bit of drop out there we'll have to account for.
Other questions for the applicant at this time?
If we approve this, he has to come back for site plan?
He will have to submit a site plan. Now, it may not have to go through planning commission, because if he's just looking at parking improvements, then we can handle that administratively. Now, if he wanted to tear the building down and start anew, then yes, he would have to come back before you. But generally, if it's just parking improvements, landscaping, things like that, we would just do that in-house.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. It's also important to mention that there is no infrastructure addition. There is no demolition. We're not putting up any type of carports. Any permanent structure will not be placed other than what is already existing.
Doug, do you understand exactly how he's going to unload cars?
Well, that's what the site plan will show. I mean, I understand what he's saying, but he's going to have to demonstrate that he can do it with the site plan.
Yeah, we can provide a schematic to show that.
Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, when we do site plans, I mean, a lot of times we'll ask for truck turning templates and things like that. You've seen those on some of the larger commercial sites that we've looked at that we know have large truck traffic. So that's something we usually ask for. So this wouldn't be any different in my mind.
Other questions at this time? Thank you.
Just to recap, make sure I got everything. We already are in the works of getting that site plan. And then also any other county standards. You mentioned the potential paving in the back with asphalt. We'll look into that, of course, if that's needed. The last point that you mentioned was that truck turning
template. When we see a site plan, we'll make a list of comments, and if we don't see it on the front end, they'll provide it after they see our comments. So
Okay,
either
thank
way.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This time, we're ready for our public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open for item number REZ 20-3-003 for Karzan Muhammad Ali. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come forward. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve based on staff comments and meeting staff approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve item REZ 20-003. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6BB, REZ 20-004. This is for Ken Wilson. Location is 3466 Manchester Pike. Commission district is 18. The county commissioner is Alan McAdoo. Size of the site is approximately 22 acres. Tax map is 126. Existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. Proposed zoning is for PUD, a planned unit development for a winery and event space. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. As stated, the applicant would like to rezone the property in order to operate a winery/event venue on the subject property. The project summary in the applicant's pattern book, which you have a copy of on your iPads, states that their business would have two main focuses, wine and cider production, and this is directly from their application, a venue where people can enjoy time on the property, whether they are drinking wine or simply enjoying live music in the outdoors. The winery is proposed to be comprised of 3 buildings. The primary building would be about 5,000 square feet and would be constructed in phase 1. It would include tasting rooms and a separate production area. There's also a portable stage that will be used for various music events with portable toilets being provided. The applicant is proposing a grass area for parking, which you see on the pattern book, that shows approximately 200 cars. We'll have some additional comments on that here as soon as I finish my staff report. I'm going to turn it over to Sheila Huffmeyer to discuss that in a little more detail. The pavilion will be constructed on the property as well, which will evolve from a space for main building activities to eventually being enclosed for wine production. Additional information can be found in the applicant's pattern book. There was a neighborhood meeting held on January 21st of this year with the residents in the area. There was a few people there. There wasn't just a ton of discussion, but there were some concerns that were brought up as far as the number and duration of the events, possible noise issues, traffic concerns, and similar items. Access to this property would be along Manchester Pike. The pattern book does show one access point, which is the existing driveway to the property. There's no other additional traffic improvements proposed, so any new or modified access points would have to be approved by TDOT, as Manchester Pike is a state road. And of course, access to property and parking areas would have to be built to county standards. The zoning ordinance, incidentally, does allow for the possibility of grass parking for rural retreats or event venues like this, but again, this is something that, if this is approved, we would look at a little more closely in the site plan review stage. The applicant is proposing to keep much of the existing vegetation on the property to serve as a buffer. Staff did inform the applicant's design engineer who was working on the pattern book we would like to see some additional buffering along the western property line, which is still zoned RM in the county. A landscape plan would also be required with the site plan to ensure conformance with all of our regulations. And of course, this would be subject to the performance standards which relate to noise, dust, odors, etc. I'll turn it over to Sheila here in just a moment, but I will say that this does appear to be compatible with the surrounding area, the use that they are proposing. We've met several times with the applicant, and we feel that they are committed to make this use a community asset. We feel that any concerns can be mitigated, so we do recommend approval, but I will turn it over to Sheila just to talk about the drainage and the soils on the property in a little more detail.
Okay, hi, I'm Sheila. I'm subbing for Mike Hughes today. So I started looking at this before the meeting, and I noticed that they've got quite a bit of, let me turn the contours off here. I'm having to use little different maps, so bear with me. These soils running through here, there's a lot of water on the property, so that's the first thing I noticed. And there's this lighter shade of green. Is that what color it looks like to you guys? Are Ruellan soils. I know Mike has talked a lot about the Ruellan soils and the Dalton soils. They are typically known to be wetland soils, or could potentially be. They have like the dark mushy gray type of soil in it that you typically see by a stream. It does not show up as a stream on our stream layer map, but it does show up as a lot of Ruellan soils. It doesn't mean that the site can't be developed. I just talked to Doug and the consultant earlier about whether or not they might need to be required to have a wetland study done. just so that they know where they cannot place structures or parking lots in the future. They had kind of showed maybe some parking or overflow parking and structures, but they ensured us that it was kind of fluid, that the buildings could easily be shifted one way or the other and moved out of these areas. So if I show you a pretty good, we'll go back to the Connect Explorer, but you can kind of see this gray or this green right through here, and there's a drainage path that goes right up through the middle of that. And then the back of it, which they are not proposing to use these back soils, but these two back parts are also those. Here's the picture. For some reason, the imagery in the Connect Explorer is a little jumpy because we don't have as many images to view it from, but you can kind of see all the water coming down the ditch through here. And then the soils out here look a little bit dark. That tends to lead us to believe that water's been sitting there quite a bit, and it kind of tends to turn the ground a little dark. So just by viewing this, I was like, well, maybe we need to at least discuss it, comment about it, and let y'all know that this is what I found today. I'm not saying it can't be done because he has the rest of the property. The home is here. I'm not sure where all he'd be able to put his soils, but I think based on, if you guys have looked at the pattern book, I think he's, maybe it's back here. There's soils back here, and then he's showing septic soils and parking lots and stuff. And then I think putting the structure back in the woods a little piece. And so he said they could kind of shift it and make sure the structure's over here, not over here, which could potentially be the wetter topsoils. So I know these pictures usually are really great, so this one's a little bit jumpier tonight. We'll go back to these and turn these off. Do they have any questions?
That concludes our report, so if there's any questions, we'll be happy to discuss them.
Now, would that wetland study be a requirement before?
We would recommend that one be done, just to make sure that they're not disturbing something that they don't need to disturb. Now, there's a lot of room on this property. I think that's kind of what Sheila was alluding to. And when we spoke with the Mr. Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel, he'll have a little presentation here in just a little bit, he said he felt pretty confident that they would be able to shift things around enough if needed. And the fact that actually the excess parking area was something that they kind of added toward the last, I wouldn't say necessarily last minute, but kind of toward the end of the project. They said, well, maybe we should have this just in case kind of a thing. So maybe not a critical component of the project. When we were talking to the applicants, they didn't really want to have just these huge events. But there's a lot of room on this site. Of course, they want to be able to maintain most of it in the manner that it already is and just kind of leave it undisturbed. So, but they have room that they can make a lot of these things work, even if there is some wetland soil. And Sheila had made the point earlier to them when we were talking that they may do the study and it comes out there isn't any problem. That can happen. Just because those soils are identified on those maps. There are times when, after you do a more detailed study, when you go out there, it turns out that those soils don't exist or it's not like you thought it was. So it might not be as big of an issue, but it's something that was identified, and we want to at least bring it up for your attention.
Is there a drain or slash stream across the property, or is there a drain does water flow across the property at times?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay.
See if I can get you a better picture. It's not an actual stream, it's more of a... Right, it did not show up on the TDEC stream map. We've also had projects come through that did not show up on the TDEC stream map, and when they went out to do their wetland study and their hydrologic determination, they came back as streams. We've also had them come back as wet weather conveyances, which means it's not a stream. So it can kind of go both ways. This tree path, this dark is water. So water is right through there. And I've heard that when it rains a lot of this area is sitting full of water from people who commute in from there every day. So, but that darkness, does it show up on those screens very well? No? Okay. Well, where my little hand is, coming right through there is a drainage path, a very defined path.
What is this thing, and I'm not getting along tonight. What is the topography of the land? How much drainage will there be toward that? How much slope is there to the back, for example, or the front either, for that matter?
Okay, so I don't have my normal GIS maps. They are not working tonight because they are physically moving some of our servers. So I'm using this map, so it's not quite as easy. So let me turn a few things off and see what I can do.
All of those concerns will have to be addressed at site plan. They will have to be before it's
Right.
approved.
Okay. Looks like it's just, this is the little drainage path coming through here. So it's picking up the water from the top of this hill and coming down. Wait, I'm on the wrong side. Here's their side. But they would address that. I think they already have they crossed it? Probably. If they have a driveway, they do. Let me zoom out.
Our focus tonight should be on whether to rezone this property, not about the
Already got it.
conditions of the property. All of those things will be addressed at site plan. We have any other questions that we need to get before staff before we hear from the applicant? Is the applicant present? Or the applicant's representative present? Or both?
Chairman Phillips, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm here representing Ken and Sharon Wilson, who are the owners of this potential winery. We're going to call it Brickstone Winery. And I just want to introduce Sharon. She is going to go ahead and kind of talk about the vision, why they're here in Rutherford County, and a little bit about their mission statement. And then I'll come back and follow up on the site plan.
Hi, I'm Sharon Wilson, and we want to build a winery in Rutherford County. Winery is considered an agritourism business. It's a different type of business. It's more of a rural retreat. We want to create an experience where people can come out and be with their families and their dogs, maybe drink some wine and spend some time in the country trying to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. We want them to be able to look at our venue and want to come back again and kind of consider us family. So that's the kind of experience we're trying to create, where you just want to sit around out in the woods and maybe have a glass of wine or a glass of cider, listen to some music, and be with your family and your friends. We think it's the reason we're here is our daughter moved to Nashville 3 years ago, and we came out to visit several times. We're from Central Virginia, and we fell in love with the area. And my husband, Kenny, is a winery builder by trade, and he's built several wineries. We've made our own wine for the last 10 years, and Kenny and I have worked in different capacities with wineries, from planting grapes through bottling, so we're very familiar with the process. We think a business like this, an agritourism business like this in Rutherford County, would do very well for both the locals and as well as bring tourism money from Nashville down here, because we're kind of halfway between Jack Daniels and Nashville, so it's a really nice spot to stop. We want to do small events. We'll have acoustic music. We don't want to have big rock bands or anything like that. We're going to limit our hours. We want to work with maybe local veterinary or local shelters to do adoption events, things like that, pet adoption events. We can do charity events. We want to even offer our facility, because the hours will be limited, maybe open during some mornings for some local Bible studies with churches. We really loved Rutherford County when we came here. We looked all over Nashville when we started looking for property. It was no easy task, but we kept coming back to Rutherford County because everybody was so friendly. Everybody within the government was really friendly and kind of welcoming to us. We plugged into a nice church. We love the music here. We love the restaurants here. So it felt like home. So we love being here. We want to my husband's been building other people's dreams for a long time, and so it's time to build our own dream, and we think this is the perfect place to do it. Let's see if I've missed anything. Nope, I think that's about it. So.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm going to go through some of the site plan slides just to kind of walk you through it. And then basically, if you know the area, it's right off of Manchester Pike, and it's surrounded by industrial on the, I believe that's on the eastern side. And then the western side is a little bit of a hybrid between large residential estates and some commercial along Manchester Pike. So as was mentioned by Sheila, the lot has a lot of open area, a lot of field area, as well as a lot of vegetation and wooded area. Currently, the design is to put all the elements of the winery, which are basically three: the main building for the wine production and tasting, and then there will be basically a pavilion area for open air entertaining, and then the pavilion, if the business grows, that pavilion will become another part of the production, and they'll build another pavilion. So basically, three buildings we're talking about, and as Doug mentioned, the largest building being a little over 5,000 square feet. We would like to recess them back into the woods just to kind of create that kind of character and use the property that's in front of the buildings for the parking. And we do have 2 acres that are allocated towards grass parking, and then the septic field would be adjacent to the grass parking. In order to screen the parking, which is something we'd like to do, we'd like to plant some vineyards and kind of create the whole idea of driving through the vineyard to get to the actual winemaking facility. And it's important at this point to mention that the winemaking is really is the agribusiness component as well. So they hope to have a business where they make the wine on site, and then they would ship it from that site. And they also like to have a venue that kind of captures the whole winemaking process. So it's more of like an educational venue for that purpose. But it's important to realize that as far as the wine making process, there will be some employees involved with that. At this point, it may be 2 or 3, it may be 5 or 6. We're not really positive based on the production they're going to need to do. But the area where the staff and that area will be paved parking. Handicap access will be there at that location as well for parking. And so there is kind of a business component that'll be a day-to-day business. The venue component is primarily a weekend type of venue, so they'll use it Thursday nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights, probably not really a Sunday night type of venue. And they want to make it more of a family-oriented situation, so the latest it'd be open is probably 11 o'clock on a weekend, 10 o'clock on a weekday. Probably wouldn't open till after lunch, for, any kind of clubs that might want to meet during a lunchtime type of experience. So it's a pretty broad base of offerings they want to do at the particular facility, which is exciting. But we feel like it's a neat opportunity for Rutherford County to have something like this. I guess the closest thing would be somewhat like Arrington, as far as something in the area that has more of that passive, relaxing type of atmosphere where you enjoy a time with your family and enjoy wine. But the neat thing is, and we've already seen 1 or 2 come through with, I guess, the fermenting business or program at MTSU. They're looking for opportunities to train their students on this process. So the Wilsons are very interested in teaming with MTSU on their fermenting process. And they have cedar production as well. That's one of the things they'd like to do. So it's not only wine, but it's also cedar, which has a whole other different kind of dynamic to it. Doug, if you hit that slide just of the building. Overall, this is the main building, and the things of note are there's a production side, which is basically, looking from you, it'd be on your left-hand side. The center portion, there's 2 bar areas, and that's where the tasting would take place. And on a venue night, that would just basically have round tables with people just kind of casually seating around that floor area. And then on the right-hand side is the bathroom facility, and that was really important to the Wilsons, that there be permanent bathrooms. And if there's a large event where we're utilizing the portable stage, they would make the fixed bathrooms for the women, and then they would bring in porta potties for the men. So they're really kind of thinking ahead about how to make it a really pleasant experience for the whole family. So the fact that they're planning on the restrooms, which is usually a huge concern with venues, building them into the program initially is a real strong component to to their desire to make a really nice place. Let's see if there's anything else. If you can get the last slide, Doug. The elevations are, basically it's a board and batten kind of siding with metal roofing. It has different levels, and that's because the production area is actually a taller ceiling, and it breaks down to where the wine tasting is actually a smaller area. And then as you get down to the restrooms, they're more of your typical 8-foot, 9-foot ceiling restrooms. And then as far as offering, there's a list in the pattern book of all the different potential programming elements they'd like to do within the facility, but I would classify it as a real indoor-outdoor facility. Wintertime would be much smaller. They'll use the inside components of the building. During the summer, spring, and fall, I would see the building opening up, and then the building would almost be like a pass-through for different activities. And as was mentioned, hay rides through the woods, fire pit area for just having different kind of bonfire events. The portable stage, as Mrs. Wilson mentioned, it's not a big rock band stage as much as the reason they wanted portable is they want to maximize the view off-site and also to figure out exactly where the sun conditions are the best in terms of it's not just going to, blare people out. So that's basically shown on the site plan, but it's kind of represented as a triangle, and that could change. And what Sheila brought up that was brought up this afternoon that I think is important to address is what we're talking about are really primarily 3 buildings, probably not in excess of 8,000 square feet with all 3 combined on a large over 20-acre site. So we have the ability to kind of move around if we need to, as far as the driveway alignment, as far as exactly where our parking is going to take place, as far as where those buildings are exactly located. We feel like there's some flexibility because we're really not pressing the boundaries of the site. The only thing I'd like to talk about as far as the recommendation for further buffering that planning staff has recommended, our only concern about that is we don't have an option currently on the adjacent property to actually expand more pastoral area, but that is the Wilsons' desire long term. They're in a good relationship with their neighbor. Their neighbor is here who sold them the property. So we'd rather not kind of divide the property kind of in half with kind of a row of evergreens. We'd like to try to stay flexible with that, protecting the, any kind of negative views from the neighbor standpoint. We've already kind of did that with, introducing an orchard area, introducing evergreen lines. We feel like between the neighbors and our facility, there'll be plenty of buffering as far as visually. We just don't necessarily want to define every line with a row of trees, and we know that if we expanded, we'd go back into that pastoral area. So that's something we'll work with planning staff on. It's not a matter of getting out of planting a bunch of trees as much as we don't want to sandbag the potential for future expansion if the business thrives. So with that in mind, I'm available for any questions you may have for me, and thank you for the opportunity. And I'll also be available after the public hearing if there's questions the neighbors may have. Thank you.
Do you know if they plan to live on site in that existing residence, or will that be office?
They do. Currently, they did live on site. The house was in pretty rough shape when they purchased it. They put a lot of energy into that house. It's actually very nice. It does have a kind of an interesting component where it's almost like 2 houses in one. So there's a chance, let's just say there's a wedding that weekend, that the house could be used partially for, association with the venue. It's set up with almost like a guest quarters, and they would just be flexible there. But they will be on site. There will be, in the program book, we reference an expansion of the current house, and primarily it has a detached garage, and we'd be making that larger for potential product storage.
Are they going to grow all the grapes that they're going to use on this location, or they have to buy grapes elsewhere?
Yeah, the grapes are more of a facade to create the ambiance. I don't think they can get the production they're going to need for on-site. They may use some of those grapes to do their own, custom home blends, but that's not really, it's not really a vineyard as much as it is a winery where they'll import the grapes. And he's got a lot of connections because he's been in the business, so a lot of those grapes will be coming from Virginia and areas, peripheral states. They would love to grow them here. If they get more land, they could probably do that, but right now we probably don't have the capacity from the grape production.
That was going to be my question there, is there's going to be any on-site. You talk about agritourism, you got to have some type of agriculture that's involved there too. But you do have orchards, I understand, that you're going to be involving there. Question I have is on the driveway and the roadway that you have in there. That will be planned 2-lane?
We know we have to widen the driveway in order to get back to the property. There is where that stream it's really like a dry conveyance. It has a lot of water in it if it's raining, but for the most part, it's dry. But there is a bridge, that kind of culvert that goes underneath the driveway. That would be the next down point, but up to that point, the driveway will be widened, and that's in cooperation with the neighbors. They've already discussed that. Sheila mentioned we had the sign. This sign, there is a sign associated with this project, and we're basically centering it between Mr. Fly's property and that driveway based on whether drainage will support it. And in the pattern book, we show overflow parking right off the left there, Pettis. And we can do, that was, I think it was kind of an afterthought. If we have a big event, we can park people down low and basically shuttle them up to the main event area. But based on we already knew it was wet, but if it becomes something that's prohibited based on some studies, we'll just forego even referencing that in the book.
My concern there, the reason I'm saying two-car driveway and the other main driveways there is if you have that many people there for first responders to come in and get out, and if something else happens, that you get all those people out in a responsible time too, and that roadway needs to be in that manner there.
Other questions of the applicant? Stay close.
Thank you.
Charlotte, you have a question?
It looks like you share a driveway. You said your neighbor, the neighbor to this property is going to speak. Is that you have cooperation with the neighbors that you share a driveway with?
Yes. In essence, the neighbor was the family that sold the property. And so right now they share that driveway currently. Their house, you basically peel off to the right to the neighbors, and their house is off to the left. And so that's always been a point of, we all knew, they knew when they purchased the property that to have a business back there, that the driveway would have to be improved.
Thank you. This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item REZ 20-004 for Ken Wilson. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come forward. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Doug, can you pull up the photograph that shows the neighboring property as well? So Clyde, can you come up? I have a question, I guess, for you. Maybe not so exploded, Doug. So in your commentary, you mentioned that perhaps in the future, you didn't want to go heavy on the buffering because there might be an opportunity to acquire some pasture land. Can you show me where that parcel is?
It's where their arrow is kind of floating. It's really directly behind the neighbor's property. If you go out there, Mike, if you look out, it feels very much like an open vista basically from where we're proposing on the edge of the woods for the structure to be all the way out. It's just like a big open field. I mean, right now you can see there's a FedEx fulfillment center off to the left, and you can glance through the woods and see it during this time of year. But for the most part, very rural. So it's basically the property directly behind the current, the neighbor's house, and they currently own that, and it hasn't been discussed like a first rights or anything on getting the property, but Mr. Wilson's alluded to me that if the business ever grows, that may be property that in the future could be available.
Right where Doug's cursor was, in the tree, the heavily treed area, is where you would propose to cut in a little temporary stage, kind of a.
No, the stage would probably float out in the pasture area.
Okay.
Because it would be more of just to sit down your blanket and just kind of watch music, and it's portable. So right now, if you can imagine that corner where the two, basically right up against where that FedEx building is, and that area right where the arrow is, right between the properties, that's kind of where the stage is shown in the pattern book.
Okay.
But because it's movable, we really didn't pin that one down.
Okay, and so your only residential neighbors are to the right, as I'm looking at it.
They're fronting Manchester Pike, and it's Mr. Fly, and it's. It's Mr. Swanson. Spoke to Mr. Swanson, and Joe just asked that we move the fire pit away from the property line to make sure that was more centered or weighted towards the other side. And Mr. Fly's concern was primarily just, the hours of operation, any kind of light. There's a lot of woods between us and them as far as the driveway would just basically run along that streamline right now, so there wouldn't be a lot of activity. We're even with the driveway, we're getting further and further away from that edge.
Okay. Go, Doug, zoom back in on the tree line, if you would. And Clyde, you said something that was, I think, in contradictory to what we saw in our notes. You are proposing a permanent restroom facility right off the get-go.
Correct. It's associated with a main building, and those would be, like I said, they would be used for women's rooms during the tasting. They're just open for the crowd that's there, but during an event, that would flip over to women's, and the men's would be in porta potties.
Okay. So, let's assume that the business is fantastic, business grows, and you want to incorporate I'm looking downfield now, okay? For those of you that went to Fontenelle and the outdoor concerts that were in the trees, beautiful setting, that you had folding plastic chairs in the front, and then you threw your blankets down in the back, flat land. Could the way this is zoned, if we approve this like this, Doug, could a facility like this grow and expand such to include a permanent stage? If they get the land next door, increase more parking, would they have to come back to us for something like that and have another public hearing if they go to? I mean, right now he's just talking about acoustic music. And we talked about a little bit about hours of operation. I mean, if we went electric and had ZZ Top out there, would we have to revisit this with the neighbors?
I believe we would. The way they have it laid out in the pattern book, it's not anticipating any of those larger, what I'd almost call concerts, really, at that point. If they wanted to kind of change that model around and say, you know what, we want to have more of the events on the lines to what you were talking about, I would advise them that, yes, they would need to do an amendment to this pattern book, which would come back through this process. And the same holds true if they wanted to add land to it. Let's say that they did work out something with the neighbor and they wanted to add some property. If business is going good, of course, we're happy for them. That's great. That's a good thing. But that property that they'd want to expand into would still be zoned what it currently is now. So they would have to come back and do an amendment to the plan development and rezone the property, similar to what we're doing right now.
Other questions or comments?
Chairman, is public hearing closed?
I'm sorry?
Public hearing is closed?
Yes.
I make a motion to approve with all of Planning Department and Engineering Department's comments.
We have a motion and a second to approve item REZ 20-004 for Ken Wilson. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? The motion to approve carries. Thank you. Once again, this is scheduled to go before the full County Commission on April the 16th. Item 6BC, REZ 20-005 for Amy Dearman. Location is 184 Sharp Springs Road. Commission district is 12. The County Commissioner is Robert Stevens. Size of the site is approximately 1 acre. Tax map is 19. Existing zoning is RM, which is residential medium density. Proposed zoning is for CG, which is commercial general. Doug.
Yes, sir. This case comes as a result of a zoning enforcement action, and I'll kind of get into that as the staff report moves on. The applicant has been operating a sign and lighting business from this property for several years. It appears to have evolved from a home-based business to a full-fledged business, which is currently on the property. The original complaint that was received by our zoning enforcement officials actually concerned the larger tract to the, I guess that'd be to the east and the northeast. And you can see on the aerial photo there, there's quite a bit of open storage of signage and different material of that nature. The applicant has been working to clean up the property. We've been in contact with them, and they have been making progress with that. Upon further research, after we got to looking into this, it turns out that there was never any zoning approval that was given or even applied for the subject property, the one that they're asking for, which is 184 Sharp Springs Road. So staff has worked with the applicant regarding this request. Based on the application materials they have submitted, their hours of operation would be from Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They currently have 11 employees, which includes the applicant. There are 4 business vehicles that will be stored on the property. They do run the business from this location, but any sign manufacturing would occur off-site. I had some discussion with the applicant a little earlier today, and she indicated that they may do some sign repair on this existing property, the subject property, excuse me, on 184. But as far as any manufacturing of signs, fabrication, anything like that, that would not happen on this property. The applicant has provided a concept plan and some exhibits, which we have included in your agenda packets, which you can find on your iPads. Access to this property would be along Sharp Springs Road. Staff does anticipate the traffic to the property would be fairly minor, as no manufacturing activities would occur on site. The applicant's concept plan does show how they would propose to lay out the site. Of course, access to the property and parking areas would have to be built to county standards. Similar to what we talked about for the first application, we'd want to see a site plan for that and for landscaping. We discussed with the applicant the need for buffering on the property. She's aware of that and knows that a plan would have to be submitted consistent with our requirements for that. Of course, performance standards would also have to be adhered to as well. Staff did not make necessarily a recommendation one way or the other on this request. We did have some conversations via email with Smyrna Town officials, which does indicate that the applicant, if they do propose to use the property in the same manner it's currently being used, being the subject property, not all the open storage, again to the east, they wouldn't have any objections. I did have some further conversations, further emails, I should say, with the town of Smyrna about this. They were a little concerned about the commercial general zoning. Of course, as you all know here on the Planning Commission, that's the heaviest of the commercial zones that we have. When the applicant first was looking to make this application, they were actually looking at the larger property, and they were actually looking at the zoning of the possibility of a portion of that larger property. So that's when we recommended the commercial general zoning. When they kind of scaled it down and said, we're going to clean up that existing property that's there, we're going to clean all that up and just use 184, of course, the application had been made by this point, and that's why in my staff recommendation I do say that if you would move to approve this, we would recommend going with commercial services, because the activities that they'd be doing on the property, that would fit within the construction sales and services classification, which is allowed by right in commercial services or commercial general. So there really isn't a need for commercial general at that point, so it can be backed up just a little bit. Smyrna Town officials did have some concerns, even with the commercial services, just because of the range of uses. They were asking about the possibility of maybe office professional. However, if it's not strictly an office, which this would not be, I don't think that'd be an appropriate zone. But based on the conversations I did have with the applicant, it seems like commercial services would probably be the most reasonable of the commercial classifications to have on this property. So with that, I believe the applicants are present, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Doug, what is the property beside it that needs to be cleaned up? What is it zoned?
It's RM, residential medium density.
What would it entail to go from commercial general back to commercial services for the applicant? What would it entail for the applicant to do that?
You mean if it was zoned commercial general already or today?
Them to move from a request from commercial general to go back to commercial services.
You can recommend commercial services because it's a lower classification than commercial general, so they wouldn't have to come back through and have another meeting or anything. If they were going the other direction, like if they were asking for commercial services, and I would say you can't recommend commercial general because that's going a step above, but since they're since I'm recommending at least a step down, you can do that at the meeting. And we would just advertise it for commercial services to the county commission should it be approved.
Doug, if this is approved, they're still going to have to go through the process of site plan and
That's correct.
all of those things.
Yes.
So anything that's there that you don't, as a staff don't like, or us as a planning commission don't like, we can recommend changes.
Right, we would have another shot at it. Now, again, I will say that if it's really just screening and parking improvements, that's probably not something you would see at the Planning Commission. That's something we would handle as staff. But again, if they were going to do a comprehensive redo of the site, redevelop everything, then yes, you would see that. But I don't anticipate that being the case should this be approved.
Doug, what is all that?
Well, material for signage, there's various vehicles there.
That's scrap?
The applicant could probably speak, yeah, I mean, there does look to be some scrap there, yes. The applicant could probably speak a little more to what it is as far as the material, but it looks like there's some existing, it looks like you can see some signs that are there, but you also see some that aren't in the best of repair as well, so.
Is that what you're saying he needs to clean up?
Sorry?
Is that what you're saying it needs to be
Yes,
cleaned
and
up?
they're working on that currently, yes, sir.
That's not the area to be rezoned.
Correct. Yeah, the area to be rezoned is the actual area where the house is, 184, where they operate the business. Right. That area Sheila is kind of panning around right there. That's the area under consideration for rezoning.
So what is the plan for this property next door that has all this junk piled up here and they're parking trucks on it? Are we asking to keep that RM?
Yes.
And just rezone the house?
Correct.
Well, maybe I'm mistaken, but I didn't think that you could just pile a bunch of stuff up.
Well,
park the
like I
trucks
said,
on it.
that's what kind of started that's what started this whole conversation that we have right now.
I mean, are they going to abandon that piece of property and not park their vehicles on it and clean it up?
I've had
I've had
discussions with
or what?
Right, I've had discussions with the applicant, and she is very aware that that property is not zoned for commercial use, and once it's cleaned up, unless it happens to be rezoned, yeah, the business can't be operated like that on this property. It simply can't. And quite frankly, the property even that they're asking for, there's no room for any of that kind of thing. So they're very much aware that this has to be cleaned up. And like I said, they are making progress, and they are on our radar screen. So we're keeping tabs on it. Ken, did you want to make any comments regarding that other property?
This property first came up at the beginning of November as a result of an e-complaint that we received, and we have been monitoring it for cleanup, even pending this application with the Planning Commission. And we'll continue to do that, pending the decision today. If the business can't be run out of, or if it's not rezoned, the property they'll be given 30 days or so to clean it up.
Will there be some type of a deadline put on cleaning that property up?
Right, well, that's what, we're working with them as far, now I realize obviously this property probably didn't get into this state overnight. It's going to take some time to clean up. So the applicant is aware of that. They are making progress. And, as far as that goes, myself and Tanya will work together to make sure that they are doing what we've asked them to do.
Other questions for staff at this time?
Can we deny this until that other piece of property is cleaned up? Or defer it?
So I think that the two are exclusive, because what you have before you today is the particular parcel where the house sits. And the question before this commission is whether it's appropriate to rezone that parcel. With regard to the adjacent parcel that is overburdened with the various items, I think you should probably trust your codes department to follow up and ensure that the code is no longer being violated. Oftentimes, it's better to get compliance without having to proceed with citations and resulting to court, which could be an inevitable action here. And if that is the route that has to go, then the applicant or whoever owns that parcel will have to go through the court system and be subject to fines.
But again, taking that into consideration with your determination here with regard to that parcel with the house on it, I think the two are exclusive, so you probably cannot consider that. But you can consider any other valid fact of the surrounding area, use, safety, welfare, et cetera.
Thank you, Nick. Is the applicant present? Good. Evening. State your names and address for the record, please.
Amy Dearman. I'm at 4111 Barfield Crescent. This is my husband, Guy Dearman. First of all, I would like to...
If I could ask you to speak up just a little bit, please. There you go. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to maybe right or wrong here. So I've kind of written some things, and if y'all will bear with me and let me, and it's kind of in big font, it looks kind of big, but just to help me. We're here tonight to request the zoning change for the parcel of land that we own at 184 Sharp Springs Road. The request is being made in order to continue to run our business at Boom Sign and Lighting. This location has the improper zoning that was brought to our attention. We started Boom Sign and Lighting in 2001 after my husband had been working at a sign and lighting industry for the previous 15 years. When he brought it to my attention that maybe we should open a sign business, it was totally unthinkable to me. I was working as a vision therapist with Dr. Jean Ann Rogers here in Murfreesboro. I was employed with her for 8 years and knew nothing of a company. I enjoyed doing the work that I was doing, the interaction with the patients and serving Rutherford County community. But after repeated conversations with my husband, the idea to start and own our own business become more of not just an idea, but maybe this is something we can do. We began to assess our financials, make plans, seek potentials, and move forward. On May 1st of 2001, with our newly received business license, my parents' approval, which is the 280, but more importantly, their financial help, Boom Sign and Lighting opened its doors for business. We started this business in the basement of our home at that time. My husband, his brother, we had one truck, one phone, and one old computer. As I stated earlier, my parents, Calvin and Bobby Sue Jones, were instrumental in opening this business. They not only assisted us financially, but owning the farm adjacent to our property allowed us to use the parcel of their land. I agree, 100%, it got out of hand. They gave us their blessings and watched it grow to the company we are today. Our beginnings were small, as many small startup companies. We had many setbacks. Just a few months in, my husband had to have neck surgery, and over a month, he ran the business from an inclined position. And then 9/11 happened. Small companies folded quickly, but failure was not an option. We owed a lot of money. We had 3 children that we needed to support. My husband quoted bids, and his brothers visited jobs, as Guy was very well known in the sign business. I remained at my job as a vision therapist with Dr. Jean Ann Rogers. Boom Sign was growing slowly, but at least it was growing. In June of 2005, I resigned my position at Dr. Rogers' office and became a full-time employee of Boom Sign and Lighting. By then, we had hired additional employees, and I needed to be there full-time. In 2008, we went to an auction and we bid on a parcel of land in Barfield, 4111 Barfield Crescent, with the anticipation of moving the business to this location. After a year of working out the details, we physically moved our residence but continued to run the business from Smyrna. The purchase of the land was a financial hardship, and we needed to once again gain some financial stability before taking on this expense and moving the entire company. At that time, we did go ahead in Murfreesboro with the CUP by the Commission Board in preparation of one day moving the company. At present, this is used for Boom Sign to store sign packages, materials, and make sign repairs. Shortly after the CUP was granted, my father was diagnosed with small small cell liver cancer, and I became one of his and Mom's main caregivers. My mom was in the early stages of dementia at this time. I had no possible time to make the county commission's necessary improvements to physically move the entire business to 4111 Barfield Crescent. My mom's care was needed on a daily basis. My father passed away with cancer in 2012. It was a difficult time, and I was needed more than ever to help with Mom's Alzheimer's. I became a primary caregiver for the next 4 years. So there was no way I could move from Sharp Springs Road. In April of 2015, our life fell completely apart, losing our only daughter in a horrific accident. She was 1 month from graduating from her BS Business Administration from Cumberland University when an 18-wheeler crossed the median on I-840 as she was headed to her morning classes. She was not only our daughter, but she was an employee of Boom Sign Lighting and had a true dream of taking this company to the next level. We lost our daughter that day. Boom Sign lost a valued employee. I say all this to you to be completely honest with you. I did not know I was not in compliance with running the company at 184 until the day that Mr. Wright walked up into the house/office and advised us of a complaint that had been filed on November 7, 2019, 11 months after losing my mom. After Mr. Wright left, I immediately called and spoke with Doug DeMossi, set up a meeting with him, and he's walked me through the process and cleanup efforts for 280 Sharp Springs Road. It does not look like this now. We are continuing with the cleanup efforts, but the rain has been a major factor. It's rained and it's rained again. But we are diligently working to right a wrong. Boom Sign Lighting is a successful business. We employ 10 employees, counting myself, 11. We pay our taxes. We've never had a neighborhood complaint and only wish to run the business at this location. We are or will be making some recommendations to this location to keep it separate from the neighboring farm that my siblings and I now own after the death of my parents. I feel whatever is decided upon to happen to the land next to what we are asking to be zoned will be divided with a barrier. The Smyrna Water Treatment Plant is also located on this road as a commercial business, and I see no reason why we both can't have commercial business on Sharp Springs Road. Please allow us the opportunity to come into compliance and allow us to remain on Sharp Springs Road. As of Thursday, I'm so sorry, Guy and I it fell out of the sky to us that at 117 Gill Street, there is a parcel of land there that is zoned commercial that we would be able to park and store some of our vehicles and our signs. I'm going to let Guy answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Questions of the applicant? Let me just ask, I think it's on some of our minds, that property that looks like a junkyard right now, you're in the process of cleaning that up.
90% of it's gone.
Okay, very good. And what will happen to that property when it's cleaned up? What's your intent for that piece of property then?
Heirs.
I'm sorry?
There's 4 heirs to that property.
She's one of the heirs.
Okay, so nothing, it'll just be green space, is that what you're saying? Okay, very good, thank you. Other questions?
Your home, right? No.
We lived here when we started our business, yes,
Okay,
sir.
but it's not a residence at this point.
No, so we live at 4111 Barfield Crescent.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
So the proposed buildings that you're planning on putting on this property, that'll cover your outdoor storage on the, so that's all the storage you'll need on this property is these buildings that you're going to propose to build?
Yes, because we've got the place in Murfreesboro on Barfield Crescent. It's got a 5,000 square foot building.
And
And when we got some storage
then to be able to rent that parcel of land.
So at the property we're looking at tonight, primarily what you'll be doing there is taking orders for signs, taking care of the business.
No, we don't do manufacturing, and most, probably 99% of our business is corporate accounts, and the signs are shipped to us from California to Washington to Canada to Florida. And that's what we're looking at this other lot for storage of them. And as far as the old signs that come down, at the storage lot that we're looking at, we're gonna have a dumpster there, and everything goes in the dumpster when it's taken down.
So at this lot right here, you'll be just handling accounts? Is that what?
Accounts and parking bucket trucks, like 1-ton trucks. The big trucks, is gonna be going to this other lot also, the crane trucks.
Okay. That's why I was just trying to figure out what are we housing on this lot, and what will you be doing there?
And the UPS and FedEx.
Oh, well, yeah, UPS and FedEx, small packages, but the big sign packages will be going to this other location.
So the commercial services would work better for this piece of property then?
I personally didn't know there was a difference.
I didn't either.
Other questions at this time? Thank you.
Comfortable if commercial services was granted, as long as you can continue the business that you are currently doing.
Our clients, and if we had to move it, I don't know what employees would go or not go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This time I'll declare the public hearing open for item REZ 20-005 for Amy Dearman. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come forward. If you would give Gail your name and address, please. Give her. Thank you. And if you would.
My name's Mason Jones. I'm one of the heirs to this piece of property, to this farm. It has all this stuff on it. I actually lived on that road since 1985 up to 4 years ago. I bought a property out on Morgan Road in Rockville. Built me a house out there for retirement. Knowing that I couldn't buy the farm, I thought I would buy the farm at some point. I realized that the property of the farm was going to be a lot more than I could afford to own. My mother and daddy did help Amy and Guy, and this is with very heavy heart because I understand what they've been through. They've been through a lot. But I do also know that these signs, they knew it was a problem. They would not address it. I'm actually the one that turned the codes on them because I couldn't get them to clean it up, and we are trying to settle the estate. We have spoke with Smyrna several times on this property being sold and developed. Heavy density development is what we're looking at on this farm. I actually own a house 2 doors down. I own the house right beside the water plant. I don't know really what I am asking. I know that we've got to sell this estate. My major concern is if we zone it commercial, this 1 acre lot, what that's going to do to us as far as moving forward at selling this other piece of property. That's my concern. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Robert Stevens, and I am privileged to serve as the county commissioner for this area. I just wanted to tell the planning commissioners tonight that I have not received any opposition from any of the neighbors on this road. If you look at the map, there really aren't very many neighbors on the road to begin with. I do appreciate the conversations I've had with Mr. Dearman. I believe that they are making efforts to clean up the property next door to this one. And I do believe that they're going to be a good neighbor there with their business, as they have been for the years that they've operated there. The only feedback I've received, which Mr. Demasi alluded to, was from the town of Smyrna. They asked that instead of this property being zoned for commercial general, that we find a lower level to do that. And it looks like from the staff comments that that's what's being recommended if it does get approved. Smyrna also said that some of the neighbors on this street were concerned about the big piece of property being annexed into the town, and they had received a petition with 6 signatures asking that it not be annexed, which has nothing to do with rezoning this one piece of property here tonight. So I just wanted to come and tell you that I have not received any opposition and don't have any opposition to this myself.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners? I received a text message from Commissioner Rhonda Allen before the meeting, and she appears to be supportive of this, but would like to pass along her desires for it to be commercial services instead of commercial general.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve item REZ 20-005 for Amy Dearman. Instead of commercial general, the recommendation is commercial services. Other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm still a little bit on the fence over this because I'm just appalled at the level of the junk that accumulated on that property in total, in consideration of the community and the neighborhood. And I'm all about small business and supporting, and it's great to see that they are successful at this business, but they don't live here. But they've made other people sit and look at this. I'm really concerned about what's going to happen in the future on this one acre tract. It's great that they're cleaning it up, and I think that maybe that's the only thing, if I vote for this, that's the only thing that's going to get me to vote for it, is the fact that this is going to be cleaned up. However, I don't want to see a codes enforcement nightmare if this sort of behavior continues. Perhaps they could be an industrial district or something else, but the way that they've treated their community is just not fair to this point.
Well, I will say the conversations I've had with the applicant, and we've had several to this point, she is trying to do the right thing. I believe that I really think that she is trying to do what the zoning enforcement folks are asking her to do as far as cleaning up this property. Like I said, it didn't get like this overnight. It's going to take time to clean. They are making progress to that. I have been very clear with her from the beginning, as we've been having our discussions, that if this property were to be rezoned, then that rest of that storage, that just couldn't migrate over to the site they're asking for. It's not zoned for that. Even if this were some sort of an industrial zoning classification, this would still be a violation because it's not screened. So they would have to do something. Quite frankly, the site that they're looking at tonight is just not big enough for this kind of storage. So I understand your concern. And that being said, I believe the applicant is taking steps to to make the situation right as far as that larger property is concerned.
So will they be required to do the buffering, screening, and the same thing that any other commercial business was?
Yeah, type 2 buffer.
Has to do.
Yes, sir. Even though, I mean, I realize that the heirs own the farm next to it, but I told her, I said, you know, that looks like there's a tree line between 168 and 184. They can use existing plantings, but they will have to screen those other sides for that. And they have some examples of some fencing and things that were in your agenda packets that they would propose to use. That'll reduce the amount of plantings and things that they would have to do. So they're very well aware of what has to be done on this site.
Other questions? Ready to vote? We have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Opposition? Let the record show we had 2 noes. Commission would like to thank Commissioner Stevens for being here tonight. It's always a help to have the commissioner comment, and what will happen at the full Rutherford County Commission, the commissioner for that district will have to make the recommendation, and usually the county commission follows the lead of that commissioner. So it's helpful for us for you to be here tonight, Commissioner Stevens. Thank you. Okay, item 6BD, item REZ 20-006, John Radford. The location is 640 Double Springs Road. Commission district is 21. The county commissioner is Shanto Sereno. The size of the site is approximately 11 acres. Tax map is 104. Existing zoning is RM for residential medium density. Proposed zoning is LI for light industrial. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This property was approved for a special exception for septic tank storage back in 1994. I attached the order of action in your agenda packets, which you can find on your iPad just for reference. Aerial photography from 2019, as you can see, does show several septic tanks being stored on the property, which is consistent with that approval. There is an existing trailer on the property, although staff isn't aware if it's actually occupied at this point. The applicant would like to rezone the property in order to operate a wrecker service facility. They are classified as transport and warehousing uses, which are only allowed in the heavy and light industrial zones and also in the Employment Activity Center zone, the EAC zone. According to information provided by the applicant, he plans to have an office building, I should say, excuse me, if you're looking at your staff report, car storage areas, and a future building as a shop. There is a concept plan in your packets that does show kind of the proposed layout of the property. Access to this property would be along Double Springs Road. The applicant proposes to use the existing driveway onto the property. Storage areas would be behind the existing tree line, so it'd be difficult, if not impossible, to see anything beyond that. There is an electric line easement that will preclude any buildings being placed under them, but a vehicle storage may be allowed. Access to the property and the parking areas would have to be built to county standards. Again, we'd get back, as we've mentioned several times tonight, we'd have to see a site plan to that effect. Industrially zoned properties are required to install a type 3 buffer adjacent to residentially zoned property, which is the county's thickest buffer. The concept plan, as you can see, does show a significant amount of existing plantings, which can be used for a landscape plan. However, there are things that they would have to do as far as tree preservation, arborist report, and things like that in order to make sure that these are viable trees that can be used. And again, that would be verified with a landscape plan. Performance standards would also have to be adhered to for this particular property. Again, this property was granted special exception for storage of septic tanks. This property was never rezoned, however, to any commercial or industrial classification, so it does remain residentially zoned. The closest non-residential zoning is located at the intersection of John Bragg Highway and Double Springs Road, which is commercial general. And you can read from my comments, I'm not convinced that this is necessarily the best place for something like this as from a zoning standpoint. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions, and the applicants are present to answer any questions you may have as well.
How far away is the closest commercial or industrial zoning?
It's at that intersection of John Bragg Highway and Double Springs Road. Hold on, I thought I had put something.
Mile.
Hold on. It's, I could have sworn I put that in here. Can you do a quick measurement on that? Yeah, to that. Right there. It's right there. About 3/4 of a mile. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm like, I know it's in here. I put it in here. I just can't
Doug,
see
is that
it.
a current picture? Is it currently being used to store septic tanks?
Based on the aerial photography, this is a 2019 photo shot that you're seeing here. There are some, at least from the aerial photo, would appear to be septic tanks on the property, yes.
Other questions for staff? You want to hear from the applicant? Okay, is the applicant present?
Chairman Phillips, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm here representing Mr. Johnny Radford, who's the owner of Radford Towing. And as far as just the site plan, as it's a little conceptual in nature, but the key components that we think are important for you to know is along Double Springs Road, all that existing vegetation is going to remain. So if you look at the disturbed area from that aerial, that's primarily where Mr. Radford plans on doing his car storage. There is an additional building, if we get approved, that he would like to do that would basically be an enclosed kind of shop, and use an existing trailer in the initial phase for the office. And so really we're talking about 3 buildings. Eventually, if the business does well out there, he'd probably change that trailer into more of a permanent structure. But he knows it's a little bit of a different application than what is in the surrounding nature, although it's been used for somewhat of a kind of commercial use up to this point. And I asked Mr. Radford to go around and speak to the adjacent neighbors, so he's got a report on that. And you can have some very specifics about the building, but one thing that was encouraging to me from the rezoning standpoint is I said, on a great day, how many trips would you be making on this street? What would be the impact from a traffic standpoint? And really, 15 runs would be a huge day in the record service business for him. He's a small operation. He's basically self-employed with himself, and he may have one other employee on occasion. But as far as the surrounding neighborhood, between the existing tree buffer that is there, additional work we would do. There was one neighbor on the, if you're looking at his property on the left-hand side, that's pretty close to the access drive. We'd like that access drive to remain in that location. We could move it if need to, but we would rather keep the existing vegetation in place. He's got no need for any kind of commercial presentation, any sort of road frontage, any sort of even signage that says, hey, we're here. That's just not the nature of his business. And so he'll explain more about that, but that's where we feel like it could be compatible in this situation, just because all things considered, it's a fairly low impact as far as a business is concerned, and the fact that he would like to keep a lot of the existing vegetation around to make sure it's screened from all the neighbors. So with that in mind, Johnny, why don't you let them know what happened with your neighborhood meeting?
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I'm John Radford. I own Radford's Wrecker Service. I've been in the business for over 30 years. My current office is at 1827 Northwest Broad. My tow lot was there for 24 years. We've just had to move it in the last year. I rented from, you'll hear from Tony a little bit later, I rented from College Motors when they first moved there, rented from Nashville Motor Cars. It's a big lot, okay, and I just sub-rented and rented the tow lots in the very back. They've had car lots out front. So I was just a subleaser from them. Right now, Nissan rents the big piece of property that's there for storage of their cars. Nissan sold about 1.5 years ago. It was locally owned, and then somebody out of Mississippi bought it, and they put a Mitsubishi store in, and when they did, I had to move my tow lot. They needed the tow storage is the only reason that I moved. I've been on Broad Street, like I said, for 24 years without an issue. I've worked with car lots, so I'm not, like we said, there's not a whole lot of traffic with me, because if it was a whole lot of traffic, I wouldn't be able to work with the car lots. I've been in compliance, been in good standings. I'm just asking, I went through when Mr. Sims is my realtor, and we looked at the piece of property that it did have commercial usage there. They told me, this is all new to me, so bear with me, okay? They told me to go talk to my neighbors that surrounded me. You learn a whole lot about some neighbors real quick when you sit down and start talking to them. When you first pull out, I don't know if they show the different areas that surround me. Where my driveway comes out over on the Double Springs thing, the first lady that I was concerned about is right beside of the driveway, and I want to be a good neighbor, you know what I'm saying? So I talked to her first. That's Miss Amanda Moffett. Her and her son lives there. She said that she didn't have an issue. She had no problems at all with it. I told her what I was doing, and that I'm a 24-hour service there, and sometimes I'd be in late at night. She didn't have an issue. I tried to go to everybody that was close. Right beside of her was a William, and I might not say this name right, Shajar, okay, and I talked to his wife. I could never catch him there, and told her what I was doing. Now, their property is beside the other people's property, but our property, where it goes back and then comes over, we kind of touch their property, but where it touches, it has nothing, it wouldn't be nothing dealing with them at all. Then, as you come out of the driveway, straight across the street over to the right, I have Mr. and Miss Phelps, and I talked to both of them on Saturday. They had a few concerns, asking me if there would be a noise deal. I said, our trucks are a little louder than a car, but it's not as loud as a dump truck, coming down the road. I have me and one other employee, so there's just two of us that work, so that would be the sum of the trucks. I don't have a big company. She asked me something about taxes, okay, if that would affect them, and I told her no, it was already a commercial use, so it has commercial taxes now, so that wouldn't affect their property at all anyway. I talked to Mrs. Gloria Span. She is straight across the street from where the driveway comes out. I talked to her today. She was a hard lady to catch. She said she has no concerns at all with what's going on. The people right next door to her, which is the property right in front of their house, is Mr. Steve Rohr. I talked to a whole family there. I got a wife, a daughter, a son-in-law, and everybody come out and had discussions with me. We talked. They probably had more concerns than anybody. We talked for about 30 or 45 minutes. Theirs was traffic. They had a bad wreck down the road probably a week earlier, and she says, the traffic is a big concern to me, and I told her, I said, look, we try to, go by the traffic rules. I says, I think 45 is the traffic thing out there, and probably could be dropped less because it is with the road there. And I told her what I did. I told her I had two trucks that come in, and I tried to give her an idea, like Mr. Clyde told you, about how it would be coming in and coming out. Our work is mainly done on the roads, towing cars. That's where we are most of the time, okay? I'm on the Sheriff's Department's rotation list, the Highway Patrol's rotation list, and the city's rotation list. I've been on those lists for 25 years. And so, if you work a wreck and then you got to bring it back to the lot, that's what you're doing. But most of the time, I'm out on the road. I'm not, there at the office. Excuse me. Down beside Mr. Rohr is Mr. Kenneth Winfrey. He's at 619. I talked to him briefly. I don't think he even cared that I was standing there talking to him, but I talked to him. Right beside of the property, right beside of him is Miss Jackie Mangrum. She did not have no issues at all, no questions. And then Miss Barnes's property, I think there's an empty lot there. There was nobody where a house has been. I think there's a driveway or something there, but there's no house. Right beside that is where Miss Barnes is. She's not the owner of the house. Her mother owns the house, and that's Miss Martha Webb, but Miss Webb is in a nursing home, and so Miss Barnes is who lives at that residence, and she did not have no issues. She really didn't have a whole lot of questions. I would appreciate your thoughts and just considerations of, what we're looking to do there. I guess that's it.
Any questions for the applicant while he's up here? Any questions at all?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. You mentioned that from time to time you bring cars back to that lot. How many How many cars do you typically keep other than your 2 tow trucks on the
Now,
lot?
what we're looking to do is put a storage lot there, okay? And that varies from time to time. Now, right now, I'm renting over on West College, and sitting in my lot right now, I probably have 30 cars, okay? And that's from wrecks, and we tow off abandoned vehicles, like for businesses. If you have a business and somebody's left a vehicle in your lot, we have to pick it up. Now, we are not a salvage yard, okay? I think that was a concern with Mr. DeMasi. We don't sell parts off of our cars. Our cars are in rotation. Okay, so like the cars that we pick up from the wreck, we bring there, an insurance company either calls us and has us take it back to a body shop, or they come and look at it. If it's deemed totaled, another wrecker will come and pick it up and take it away. Our cars that are been abandoned, like if somebody don't have insurance or something, we have to file with the state. That normally takes 60 to 90 days to do that paperwork. When we're through with it, we either sell it or we take it to a crusher, to a salvage yard and do it. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Well, my question was very closely related. How long and how many? You've answered that.
It varies from time to time.
How long would those cars kind of stay there?
30 to 90 days normally. Okay. And the number varies. Okay. Depends on how many wrecks you got. Depends on if we are, got a bad winter. It picks up right about time for when school starts and when school gets out, because we're in a college community. We tow for several apartments. The kids abandon their vehicles when they leave, okay? And so either they'll tow them when they leave, or when they start to fill the apartments back up, we might, at that point in time, that would be like a big boom. We'd pick up like 10 or 15 at one time, okay? Sometimes you can have them out of there within a week. Sometimes you're, 2 months before you can get rid of them, by filing paperwork with the state, finding out if there's a lien holder or something like that. But it varies. It fluctuates, on what you have there. Right, like I said, right now I've got about 25 to 30 sitting in my lot.
The yellow that's on the screen up there, you've got the vehicle storage. Is that a building or is that just a lot?
It would be a gravel lot with a fenced-in lot around it, a chain link fence, okay? And then, of course, we've talked to Mr. DeMasi, and I am saying that right. Okay, sorry. And then whatever, we have a whole lot of trees and all around there blocking it. Like half the people I talked to had no idea that there was septic tanks being stored in that place, because you pull in and then it opens up, but there's all kinds of trees and all around it. And if there was a spot where that was open, that we're going to put fencing around, so there would be nothing, where neighbors, that would be an eyesore to a neighbor.
Is that the fencing with webbing in it?
It depends on what we got to put around it. You know what I'm saying? We have the trees around it, and if we put a wood fence around it, there would not be webbing around it. Okay? We're not out. Now, it also depends on what they tell us that we have to do. We'll do whatever they say. Most of the time, our fences, like on Broad Street, it has the webbing around it because we're out in the open. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing blocking us, and to stop the eyesore so nobody sees what's in there.
And I'll kind of chime in just a little bit. Of course, if this were to be approved, we'd want to see a site plan. And when we met with the applicant, we explained that to them, where they would have primarily for their vehicle parking, not their vehicle, the wrecked storage area, but primarily for like business vehicles, personal vehicles that they drive there or whatever. We would expect that to be paved. Now, the area where they're storing the vehicles, the wrecked vehicles, we could probably get by with gravel on that. Just because that's not a parking area in our mind. It's really more storage, so we could work with them on that. Now, as far as the buffering and screening goes, they would have to show that they can meet the standards. Now, if they wanted on the interior of the site to have, like a chain link with some webbing around it or something like that, we could probably work. That wouldn't work necessarily for the actual buffer itself, but they have so much planting out there, just, the amount of plantings that are there, I mean, they may be okay with what they have already. So we would just have to have, I mean, based on the aerial, it, looks fairly dense. We would just have to have a little more detail. Should just be approved on the site plan showing how the different trees and, again, arborist report that they're viable, whatnot. So that would be part of that.
Other questions of the applicant at this time? Thank you.
Yeah.
Hold on just a minute, Commissioner, if you would. Any other questions for staff before we get into our public hearing? This time I'll declare the public hearing open for item REZ 20-006 for John Radford. Now, Commissioner. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm so delighted to be here, and I came early this evening, and so that's why I'd like to support the rezoning here. Mr. Sims and Mr. Redford and I have met last month, and so both of them explained about the situation of me, so I'm be familiar with this very well, since I live not very far from Rock Spring Road, Double Spring Road, and so and also in my district, I also haven't heard anyone call for oppose or anything. So I thank you and for allowing me to say some support and for a few seconds. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Sciarrino. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? If you would give her your name.
My name is Greg Hall. I'm with City Auto here in Murfreesboro. I'm really not as much about the zoning as I am about the person, Johnny Radford. Just to tell you, my father, Malcolm Hall, used to own College Motors. We rented to him for many years there on Broad Street. We always had a screening up or whatever we needed in the back of the lot to make sure that none of the cars were visible from the outside. As I was sitting here thinking, if you, in this type of atmosphere, if you used a green screening on that fence right there, you would blend in just like you're not even there probably. For something like that. But as far as Johnny, every year that we did business, he was always on time. He always made sure the lot looked good. He always made sure everything was there. And the funny thing was, he was talking about it. We rented him an office and then the back tow-in lot back there, and it did. The cars changed cars, but there was always 30 cars or so in there. But the traffic from it, because we were busy selling cars, stuff like that. We had a service department, so we had customers coming in. His trucks really weren't there all the time, and he was out moving a car from this body shop to another body shop where State Farm says, no, we're sending it to Danny Wallace or whatever, and stuff. And so he's going place to place and things like that. The cars that end up there at the lot usually are accidents, or if, especially at the college, like he was talking about, those cars there. And so you'd have a customer come by, pay their whatever it was to get their car out. But just a very solid, straight person that we never had a problem with. I still do business with him today. I think I owe him some money right now for a tow, so he's just a really good person. So if there's any questions you have on me as far as his authenticity and stuff like that, please ask me and I'll give him my full support.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request?
I'm Larry Sims of Sims Commercial Realty. I'm your neighbor across the street over there. And looks like we're going to make some improvements around here, which is good for us. Johnny, I've known for a pretty good while. He has been very sincere. Whatever he tells you, he's going to do it. Your record service is like your doctor. When you need them, you need them. And we all need a record service, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't like to have them around. When he called me, I thought, well, we've got the perfect location. It's in a transitional area. Double Springs Road is really going to be a good road down the road for certain types of business. So I think it's an ideal business to start out something, and everybody's going to be looking at it. It's close. It's going to probably be eventually in the city. I think the property behind it has been zoned into the city. It's going to be a residential development, but it's buffered, so you will never know it. So do consider him. He's a wonderful person. He does the right things, and I think you'll be impressed with what he does for you. And if you need your car towed, be sure to call him. He's very good and very reasonable, too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Doug, would you kind of refresh our memory on the history of that particular product? Was it that land being not zoned but giving a conditional use? How did that all come about, and is it still being used for that purpose today?
Yeah, back in, it received a special exception in 1994. If you look on your iPads, you'll see a copy of the special exception kind of toward the back of that report. It was basically, there were a couple conditions that they put on, well, really just one. It says that the applicant would not have any more than 15 tanks there at any one time, and you can see it there on the big screen. Thank you, Sheila, for bringing that up. When you look at the aerial map, now again, that picture is a little dated. It's a 2019 aerial shot, which is about a year old. But you can see when you zoom into the property, yeah, and we can look at that. I mean, you can see what are clearly, those are septic tanks that are being stored on the property. You can see there's some on some, what look like trailers or something like that. And there's a few just kind of lying on the ground. So to answer your question, yes, it at least back when this aerial shot was taken, it was being used in that manner. So now are those tanks still there today? That I don't know. But it looks like that since '94 that at least based on the aerial photography that we've seen, it looks like it was being used for that at the latest last year, that the evidence that we've got.
Also, let me ask this question on behalf of the commission. Light industrial, although it's light industrial, still kind of heavy for that particular area, and there's no set rules about this business always being there. If it's zoned industrial, it'll always be zoned industrial. And if this business sells to someone else, what type of other light industrial businesses could be there?
Light industrial allows for a variety of different, well, pretty much most commercial uses, maybe not all, but I'm looking at the chart right now in our zoning ordinance. It would allow for things like administrative services, special exception for community assembly, which would be like churches, lodges, things like that. Let's see, essential services would be allowed in that district as well. Extensive impact facilities would be allowed by special exception, at least certain ones, like landfills wouldn't. That's considered an extensive impact facility, but that would not be allowed. That's only allowed in heavy industrial. Let's see, healthcare facilities would be allowed. I always, preface this when I say this, but adult entertainments are allowed by special exception. Now, when I say that, understand that there are special conditions that they would have to meet, which this site couldn't. Okay, it's too close to other residentially zoned property. So, although it's allowed by special exception, this property would not qualify for that. Animal care, veterinary services, pretty much any, most of your commercial type uses, outdoor amusement and services would be allowed by special exception. You could have banks, restaurants, general personal services. That could be like a daycare or something like that on those lines. You could have a group assembly by special exception, which is more than what a community assembly would allow. Medical services would be permitted by right. You could not have transient accommodations, which would be like a hotel, campground, something like that. You could have car sales, car repair, various light industrial activities, but no heavy industrial activities. You could have scrap operations by special exception only. And then, of course, the transport and warehousing, which this falls under, would be allowed by right. So that just gives you just a quick overview.
Thank you, Doug. Questions, comments, or concerns?
A map to see John Bragg Highway is the closest commercial in this area.
Correct. Yeah, the subject property is right there where where the mouse is. No, it's about 3/4 of a mile. Yeah. Someone pointed, I think Nick pointed that out, and I finally found it on the staff report where I'd actually put that in there. I knew I had, I just couldn't find it. But it's about 3/4 of a mile. Right, at that point.
This property adjoins property that's already zoned in the city of Murfreesboro.
That's correct.
If they wanted to, could they ask for incorporation into the city of Murfreesboro?
They could ask. Now, the cities, as far as their attitudes toward annexation has changed a lot over the last few years. Now, whether or not they would entertain this or not, I don't know. Most of the people that would want to be in the city would want access to the sewer. I don't know how practical that would be for this particular property. There's a copy of the Murfreesboro zoning map, a little snippet in your staff reports, shows the surrounding zoning. It looks like the area immediately adjacent to this property is zoned RS10, which is a single-family zone, minimum 10,000 square foot lot size. But when you go a little further into the lot, it becomes RS6, which I believe is a more dense single-family residential zone.
I can't make a motion.
So Doug, when you recommended light industrial on this, it's about the category that he's going to have to fall in, right?
Well, yeah, there isn't. This is the first zoning classification that would allow the use. He couldn't go anything later than this.
I'd make a motion to approve with all staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve.
I'm just wrestling over, I know the intentions are good and I believe that, but I'm thinking toward the future, light industrial just seems awfully heavy-handed for middle of residential medium density. So I just can't support that at this time and that location. Not that it wouldn't be in the future, but I just want to go on record to say that.
Okay.
I feel the same way. I know Mr. Radford, I've used him myself and recommend him. He's a wonderful man and a good business person. However, I have a hard time putting industrial in the middle of the residential, that far away from any other commercial development. It's the zoning that bothers me and what the future can bring for that zoning.
If I'm not mistaken, Doug, that kind of mirrors what the staff's recommendation is.
Correct.
Those comments, the last two comments, okay.
And on our, it says the comprehensive plan for Rutherford County, it doesn't match as well for the city. The future land map also a suburban residential area. So even if they go to the city, it doesn't match the city's plan for this area as well.
And just so you understand, I know there's a motion on the floor right now, we're just having discussion, I understand that. If that motion were to fail and another motion was necessary, I would be cautious. I provide that information just for your information as far as what another land use plan may say, but I would not base any decision that we make on a plan from another jurisdiction. Just be aware of that, because we obviously can't enforce that. I just put that out there just because sometimes we look at property that, it borders the county and city, and, you know, what our plan says versus what their plan, they don't always jive. But I put that out there more for your information, but I'd be cautious to actually use that as a right. I mean, I just really was saying that. I think you all knew that. I just kind of said that to make sure it got out there.
Doug, we had from time to time discussed something that we kind of refer to as a PUD light to provide some sort of boundaries. And I think Mr. Radford would make a good neighbor. But what I'm hearing is the concern is what if it's the zoning is changed, or what if the use is changed and someone else comes in and uses it for something different down the road, and you have something terrible in the neighborhood? Is a PUD light something that could be an effective?
Well, that is an option. I mean, of course, commercial PUDs don't typically require the same. Well, we saw the one earlier. When you see that there's the PUD for the winery that was on there, those typically aren't as intense as far as there's still a lot of work that goes into them. But when you see the pattern book that's coming up next for the next development, you'll see that there is a difference between them. But I mean, that is an option if you weren't comfortable with just the straight light industrial zoning. You could just tell the applicant, come back when you have something different. You could even recommend denial of this. They could come back asking for something different. I mean, they wouldn't be time barred from that. It might be cleaner to just recommend denial to be done with it if that was the way you wanted to go. And then they would get the message, yes, we don't want light industrial here, but we might be more open to a PUD, because that would require a new application, because it's a little different than just deferring the application for them to get information on this. They'd be asking for something completely different. It'd be a whole new application. So that would be my recommendation. If that is the way it goes, again, there is a motion on the floor for approval. We would just have to see kind of where the motion goes.
We have a motion and a second to approve item number REZ 20-006 for John Radford. Any other questions? Let me just go ahead and call for a roll call vote on this, because I know there's going to be some people, and I don't want to try to interpret all that stuff. So if you would, Gail, would you please call the roll? That was a motion to approve.
Charlotte P. Craig Lynch. David Jones. Jim Aberwater. Lee Bogle. Marvin Whitworth. Mike Cush. Pettis Reed. Jeff Phillips.
I think we got 4-4, so you're going to force it on me. Chairman votes no. We need another motion.
Yes.
Please, what you
Yes,
said
ma'am.
about a PUD.
Since that motion failed, so of course we need another motion to affirm whatever it is that the action's going to be. I think the cleanest thing to do is, if you would like to see him go a PUD route, I think you just can make a motion to deny. I mean, it has to be just as simple as that. It's a motion to deny, but you can say as part of that, we would prefer to see this as a planned development as opposed to that. Now, let me just say this. If you don't think you are open to a planned development, I wouldn't even throw that out there. Don't make him go through all the work just to bring it back up here to have him be denied again. But if you're more comfortable with that, at least you could. That doesn't mean you're bound by it by any means. But if you were to bring it in and it met the concerns that you had, addressed the concerns that you had, I think if you just deny the light industrial zoning and say, bring us back a PUD, then.
Just denied this, so they have the freedom to come back.
Well, right, yeah, well, you hadn't denied it yet. The only thing we've had is a motion to approve that failed. So right now, it's still out there. It hasn't been, yeah. So, but yeah, if you're more comfortable bringing it with that would be what I'd recommend. Can you give her, Lee, the, yeah, thanks.
back as a PUD and is approved, and Mr. Radford uses it until his retirement, what happens to the zoning after that? When he sells?
Nothing. Yeah, if he sells it as the PUD. Someone would buy it from him under the same parameters as he was using it. If somebody else wanted to use it differently, they would have to come back through this body and do something completely different.
I make a motion to deny the zoning for light industrial. With the recommendation to come back as a PUD.
Ms. P., if I may, just from all the discussion I'm hearing, it's probably better to do what Doug suggested and simply just submit your motion to deny. And you might want to also support that motion with some of the reasons that you previously stated, if those are your legitimate concerns to support the motion, and then let that motion go through a vote. And then if the applicant later wants to come back and submit a PUD request, he can do so.
I make a motion to deny the light industrial due to not being part of the Rutherford County Comprehensive Plan and all the land around it being not matching
Residentially zoned, maybe, yeah.
not matching the zoning around it.
Second. We have a motion and a second to deny. Other questions?
Mr. Chair, I have I guess a question for protocol of our rules. If it's denied, is there a time limit before they can reapply?
The only time the time limit applies is if it's actually denied at the County Board of Commissioners. This, of course, when you're denying, you're just recommending, okay? So you're making a recommendation for denial. I think the applicant's probably heard you loud and clear as far as what your concerns are and what you will be looking for if this were to come back. But to answer your questions, he's not time barred from that. Now, if he goes for the plan development route, of course, we'll help him through that process. We'll have to have the official neighborhood meeting, make the application and whatnot.
So if we turn this down, then it still goes before the county commission, and if they turn it down, there is a time limit.
He would be a time barred at that point.
There's a very open opportunity, even including right now, that the applicant can withdraw.
That's correct.
Withdraw their request, and then we don't need to vote on it, and it doesn't go before the county commission with any
Correct,
delay.
because after the recommendation goes through, I imagine I'll have if this is approved, of course, I imagine I'll have conversations with either the applicant or the applicant's representative, Mr. Roundtree, where we'll discuss that. And if he decides not to move it forward and just withdraw, he'll send me something, an email or something saying we're withdrawing this application, and then we'll just wait to see where the chips fall from there.
This also could go before the county commission and could pass. Very well pass at the county commission. So it was a split vote here, and it could very well pass at the county commission. I think Commissioner Sciarrino made a recommendation to approve, and that could be his recommendation before the county commission. So there's a lot of options here. We haven't voted, have we? We have a motion and a second to deny REZ 20-006. Other questions? All those in favor of that motion to deny, please say aye. Opposition? That's really weak, you guys. I'm going to say that the motion to deny carries. Okay. I'll call for a voice if you guys want to. Very good. The motion to deny carries. I heard 2 no's on that, okay? Okay, item 6BE, item number is REZ 20-007, Richard McGavin by Rob Moclan. Thank you. From SEC, location is 4002 East Compton Road. Commission district is 4. The county commissioner is Robert P. Size of the site is approximately 36 acres. Tax map is 67. The existing zoning is RM. Proposed zoning is for PUD, planned residential development for a subdivision. Doug?
Yes, sir, thank you. This is our final rezoning application for the night. The applicant is proposing to rezone this property to a planned unit development, PUD, for Kings Mill Estates, which is a new single-family residential subdivision. The total number of residential lots, as you see in the pattern book, which is on your iPads, is 74. I will say that the information in our staff report, I was speaking with the applicant's representative, Mr. Mulchin, right before the meeting. The pattern book actually said the minimum lot size was 8,000 square feet with a minimum of 65-foot width at the right-of-way line. That's actually not quite correct. The minimum lot size would be 7,800 square feet, and the minimum would be 60-foot width. So that'll be changed in the pattern book and in our staff comments. I just wanted to make sure that that was brought up. The minimum house size is 1,600 square feet, vinyl elevations on primarily all sides. I believe the frontage is going to have some brick masonry, as I recall. Sidewalks will be on both sides of all streets, and open space has been provided, and this development will be served by a step system, and all houses would be for purchase. There was a neighborhood meeting held on this particular application on that same night as the other one earlier in the agenda, January 21st of this year, with residents in the area. Some of the concerns raised did include stormwater and drainage, the type of homes that would be built, the ownership of those homes, of course, traffic concerns, and any proposed buffering that might be shown on the site. The applicant's pattern book states that under the current zoning, the property could support up to 104 units. That is technically true, as the minimum lot size is 15,000 square feet in the RM zone, which is currently zoned. If you just took the acreage and divided by 15,000 square feet, you would get right about 104 units, about 2.9 units per acre. However, most developments we see in the RM zone range anywhere from 1 to 1.5 units per acre. A more realistic number, when you account for soil area, right-of-way, easements, et cetera, is somewhere in the 35 to 54 unit range. I will say that this property actually was approved over 10 years ago it was just a straight zone. It was for a total of 58 lots, 55 of which were going to be residential. So you can see with the PUD that they are going to be getting just a little bit more yield, about 19 or so or more lots is what they're looking at. So not just significantly more, but more than what they could have gotten with an RM zone. Access to the property would be along Compton Road. They do show 2 access points. No additional traffic improvements are proposed beyond the right-of-way dedication. We talked with the applicant about, when you look at the pattern book, the streets are fairly straight and fairly long. We had some concerns about this becoming kind of like a racetrack type situation. The applicant did state they would look at doing some stop signs at the cross street there, which I think would help with that. Of course, any new or modified access points would have to be approved by the county highway department, as this is a county road. The applicant states in the pattern book driveways will be a minimum of 16 feet and be able to accommodate at least 2 cars. The minimum front setback is shown to be 35 feet, which would allow for several cars, so that's good. There was going to be an option for side entry garages, as it's stated in the pattern book. However, they have taken that out, so the side entry garages are no longer going to be an element of this pattern book, which gave staff a little more comfort, because the diagram that they had showed in their pattern book originally, that driveway wasn't going to be as long, and there may be some issues with parking multiple cars on that. Buffering is not typically required between residential developments, so they're not showing any here. The pattern book does indicate about 6.5 areas of total open space, not counting step lot. Residential PUDs are required to have a minimum of 10 acres of open space, with half of that being usable, which this does appear to meet. Performance standards are not applicable since this is a residential development. The proposed density of this subdivision, which is about 2 units per acre, is consistent with the recommendations of our comprehensive plan. This is in the suburban belt area, which does make a recommendation of no more than 3 units per acre. So just to give you a little bit of information on that. We did have some questions, again, regarding some of the traffic in the subdivision and traffic calming and things like that, but we're comfortable with the concept as it is presented. It's not just a huge subdivision, but they are, I think, making decent use of the property that they have. Of course, if this is approved, the applicant does have to submit detailed construction drawings to ensure that all county stormwater regulations are met. Again, drainage being a concern that was brought up at the public meeting. It's a concern that we have with any project that we look at. With that, staff does recommend approval. I did speak with Commissioner P. about this. This is in his district a little earlier today. He said he did have calls kind of on both sides of the aisle, so to speak, but he didn't really indicate one way or the other, but I don't believe he's present tonight. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff at this time? The applicant available? Evening.
Good evening, Rob Mulchin, SEC. I'm here on behalf of Dr. Garvin, the owner of the property, in regards to rezoning this property. As Doug alluded to, this project actually was, the property was more or less approved for development back in 2006. It fell through the recession process. During that time frame, the step systems back then, there really wasn't a limitation on the number of minimum lots that you could have, but in the time since 2006 to today, that number has been set at 60 lots minimum. So with the development as it was previously approved, we're at 58 lots, but 54 of those lots were buildable lots because the other lots were open spaces or the step lot systems, the areas for that stuff on that side. So we were under the cap in regards to being able to, bring that old plan back to life on that side. So we had to get above 60. So the only way to get above 60 was to bring this back to you today as a planned unit development. And so in doing that, by having to shrink the lots in order to get enough lots on the actual property to get above that 60 lot threshold. It's my understanding that CUD is evaluating whether or not 60 is a good minimum for them. So we've, based on the density that we've asked for tonight in regards to 74 lots, we're looking at pushing that to over that 70 lot threshold. That's maybe one of those areas where CUD may be looking to move that number from 60 to 70 on that side. So just based on the overall size of the property and the size of the lots that we wanted to bring forth for the home product that we're looking at putting on this, that's where the number has fallen at this point in time in regards to getting above that 60 lot threshold to actually make this property viable again like it was back in 2006 when we brought it through a straight zoning back then on that side. So like I said, these lots are 60-foot minimum width on that side, 7,800 square foot minimum lot size on that side. You're looking at homes that are roughly 1,600 square feet and up on those lots on that side, so a pretty decent floor plan on that side for these. If you can see in the plan itself, we do have a pretty significant amount of usable open space like Doug talked about. We do have two more or less open space parks that you can see there. One of course, has some frontage back to East Compton Road, and there's also one in the back where we're looking at incorporating unpaved nature trails for walking, a dog park, a playground, and of course a space for the mail kiosk and parking for that mail kiosk, but will be used in conjunction for parking for one of those open spaces that has the dog park up on that side. So this property has a couple different step fields, as you can see on the plan there, that's kind of separated, one up along East Compton. The majority of this property along the southern, the southern portion of it is more or less step field or open space against the adjacent properties. And then we also had an isolated area that's kind of that middle mass in regards to the opportunities for those soils. These soils were originally looked at and approved way back in 2006 as the SEP system was evaluated by TDEC in regards to those soils at that point in time, and also by CUD. So it was more or less we're just reusing the same spaces that were already allocated for those, but we had to restructure the street grid to make the efficiency for the lots in order to get us back above that threshold to make this a viable project for bringing forward the step system on that side. So I'm available for any questions now or after the public hearing, and I appreciate your time and consideration of the project.
Questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item REZ 20-007 for Richard McGavin. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward. Would please give her your name and address.
My only concern is the detention pond.
Where's the water going? I'm already getting water coming to the left of my driveway. Where the field drains, there's 4 culvert pipes under the road. The road used to flood. The detention pond's on up the other end. Am I going to be getting water from that end? This end?
Let me, this is probably not a question and answer period, it's a comment period.
Yeah.
But let me try to answer that. We get a lot of questions about water, so Doug would.
I spoke with him.
Okay. Sheila, would you answer that? Or I could try to answer it if you don't want to.
Okay, so I have to be honest, I've not looked at this plan yet, but I will. And when it comes through, they have to abide by our detention and water quality standards that we set in place. They have to detain at least the 50-year storm flow.
Well, it's already flowing one side. I just didn't want the other end of my property getting it. I'd be in the middle.
So we'll look at it. They do have to abide by our standards. If we deem that there's some type of volume situation, we can also step in and get them to do a volumetric flow on the size of the ponds and the outlet structures and what they're doing. That comes a little bit later.
To answer your question shortly, any development such as this residential development is required to have a plan to handle the water that development creates, and they're required to hold all of that additional water on their property and not release any additional water on anybody else's property. Does that give you your answer?
Yeah, the subdivision looks nice. It really looks nice, better than an overgrown field.
We'll look at this plan in detail, and that will have to be addressed.
So as far as subdivision, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'm sorry, what was it?
3780 East Compton Road. I've been at my property for 20 years, 3780 East Compton Road. You know, of course, I understand people have got to build. That being said, our road is very narrow. Traffic is a huge concern. Shoulders are very narrow. Drop-offs are steep on the edges of the roads. This is already, you know, we are already beginning to see our roads developed into 5-acre lots, so we're getting increased traffic already. Living where I live for the last 20 years, driving up 96 has changed quite a bit. I know that's not where I live, but if it's any sign of what's going to happen on East Compton Road cannot handle the traffic at all. So I am against it for traffic reasons until the county can come up with better traffic management, especially in areas like this where we're going to have to get stopping traffic, turning possibly on dangerous roads with steep drop-offs.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request?
POWEO 3032 East Compton.
All right, thank you.
I'm new to this, so I'll just try my best. After looking over the comprehensive plan for Rutherford County, we feel that this subdivision is going to leapfrog the developmental patterns and create a fringe neighborhood not compatible with the present county comprehensive plan. We see no improvements for walkability, bikeability that connect this neighborhood to the urban core. We had no issues when we bought the property with an RM zoning. I understand there's issues I don't understand. Well, I do understand. If you go to a PUD, you can get 19 more units. That's what it comes down to. But as the gentleman said, East Compton, I see no plan in the GIS to improve East Compton. It's very narrow. There are no shoulders through most of it. Roy Arnold is a nice neighborhood. It's a lot bigger. Everything is going to 1 acre and 5 acres out there. I see this as a just plop down in the middle of nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners? Doug, would you, while we're mulling this over, would you make a couple of comments on traffic and roads, as we had this discussion many times?
Yes, sir. If this is approved, of course, they'll have to submit a preliminary plan. A preliminary plan does, their pattern book actually does show right-of-way dedication on their side of the road. Now, part of that, as far as any improvements they may, as we look at the preliminary plan and the construction drawings, we may have to look at, the addition of shoulders or something like that in this area, just to make it so the road is more compliant, if you will, with county road standards as they currently are. That's something we would have to look at that point. Of course, this isn't. We've seen developments, of course, a lot larger than this as far as that goes. So, as far as turn lanes and things are concerned, I mean, that might not be as much of an issue as we've seen in some others. I will say that when I was looking at this, of course, there's no traffic counts that I could find right there in front of the property. I did find a couple, though, that TDOT had done. There was a 2018 count. It's about, let me see. The closest TDOT traffic count's about 1.3 miles to the northwest near Saddle Drive, which is a little bit way down the road, which did identify a 2018 count of 2,238 vehicles per day as compared to, it gets gone up over the last several years. There is a second count. There was not quite a mile to the southeast along Sharpsville Road, which identified a count of about 1,016 vehicles per day, which again has been going up from 944 and 930 from the previous couple years. So, of course, traffic is always something, along with drainage, that we look at, with every development that comes in. And I will say that, I understand the gentleman's concern about the number of lots. Again, this was approved under the RN, or I guess it would have been RS15 or R15 back in 2006 for about 55 lots at the time. This isn't really much more than what had been originally approved. As the applicant stated, the big reason that had happened was because with the step system, CUD went with a different minimum. So to meet that minimum, they had to shrink the lots down just a little bit. So all that being said, even if this isn't approved, this property could still develop in some manner, depending on the amount of soils on the property. Now, you wouldn't get the amount of lots that you're getting now, of course, but it would still be allowed to develop with a minimum 15,000 square foot lot if they could meet all the other criteria.
Just kind of add to that, it's not whether or not this property can be developed. It can, but it's what kind of development we want on that property, whether it's a planned unit or just a regular subdivision. And that's the decision we'll be making tonight.
Mr. Chairman, question for Doug. Now, I understand waiting on a C letter to pinpoint the exact number of lots, or did I misunderstand that?
We got that. Let me see. I'm pretty sure we had that information.
Number's approximately 74?
That's what they're requesting.
Wasn't a PUD approximately 50 lots, give or take?
roughly. Yeah, I mean, if you could, of course, that would be with the step system. Now, the step system, they won't allow you to go below 60 lots, so they would, if you couldn't do a step system in that regard. Yeah, we do have actually both a intent to serve from CUD for both the step and the water for 74 single-family lots. Based on their evaluation, and these letters are both dated in January of this year, let's see, the anticipated infrastructure should meet domestic water and fire demands by the developer, and the maximum number of residential lots to be served would be 74 based on the information provided for the step side of, for the step system. So we do have that information. We're not waiting on anything on this one.
As far as potential improvements to the roadway, we could see some in the site plan as far as...
Well, the platting stages at that point. They already show on their pattern book right-of-way dedication, as you can see. We would work, look at the design and talk with, of course, we'd have to talk with Greg Brooks, our highway superintendent, as far as if they needed to do shoulder improvements, on that side of the road as part of the development. So, sorry?
That would be on the county's dime, though, right?
No, the developer would pay for that. That portion of it. Now, if they did a whole project out there, the rest of the road and the other side of the road, of course, would be county. But this portion of it, right in the frontage of the property, that would be up to the applicant.
Can't tell from the map, Doug, but just looking at this, is there going to be plenty of room for school buses and emergency vehicles to come back in and turn around?
At those cul-de-sacs would have to be designed to our standards, and they meet as well as I know. I know we've talked with our fire department and our school. I think our minimums meet their requirements, so we're in good shape there. Yes, sir.
We have a motion and a second to approve with all staff comments. Other discussion? Once again, we have a motion and a second to approve item number REZ 20-007 for Richard Gavin. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Doug, you have anything?
No, sir, I do not.
Please say no.
I'll say no.
Thank you. Our next planning commission meeting will be at 9 a.m. on the 23rd of this month. It'll be in the planning mezz. And also, I'd like to thank you and the public, our commissioners and the public, for your participation tonight. It's been very, very helpful for us to discuss these matters. And once again, it's not that we all should always agree. So I appreciate you. And I also appreciate the two commissioners that were here tonight sharing their comments with us. Thank you very much. Anyone have anything? Thank you again. We're adjourned.